I think I didn't do anything wrong, just made a harmless joke at our wedding. But now, as I'm holding the divorce papers my husband's lawyer delivered, I realize everything changed in that one moment. All I did was tease him about his size in front of everyone. How could that end a marriage? Before we dive deeper into the story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. The reception hall buzzed with laughter and clinking glasses as I stood up, champagne flute in hand, ready to give my toast. Michael looked handsome in his navy suit, though I could see the nervous tension in his shoulders. Our guests, nearly 200 family members, friends, and co-workers, turned their attention to me with expectant smiles. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, my voice carrying across the decorated hall with its twinkling lights and white roses. "I want to thank everyone for being here to celebrate Michael and me on this special day." The crowd murmured appreciatively. I caught sight of my mother, Yvonne, beaming at me from the front table, and my best friend Tanya recording everything on her phone. Michael's father, Paul, sat stoically beside his wife, while Rachel, Michael's younger sister, watched with a warm smile. "Now, I have to share something with all of you," I continued, feeling the champagne bubbles making me bold. "When Michael and I first started dating, I thought he was perfect. Handsome, smart, successful." I paused for dramatic effect, but then I discovered he had one tiny little problem. A few people chuckled, sensing a punchline coming. Michael's smile faltered slightly, but I pressed on. "Ladies, you know what I'm talking about," I said with a theatrical wink. "Size matters, right? And let's just say Michael is compact. But you know what they say, it's not the size of the boat, it's the motion of the ocean." The room erupted in shocked gasps and uncomfortable laughter. Some guests looked mortified, while others giggled nervously. I gestured toward Michael with my glass. "Don't worry, honey, I still love you, even if you're not exactly generously proportioned." Michael's face had gone completely white, then flushed, deep red. His jaw was clenched so tight I could see the muscle twitching. Paul Wynn looked absolutely furious, his hands gripping his napkin. Rachel's mouth hung open in horror. "Oh, come on, everyone, it's just a joke," I laughed, noticing the uncomfortable silence spreading across the room. "Michael knows I'm just teasing. We laugh about it all the time at home, don't we, honey?" Michael stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "Excuse me," he said quietly, his voice strained. He walked toward the exit without looking back. "Michael, wait," I called after him, but he was already pushing through the doors. "Oh, he's just being dramatic," I said to the crowd, forcing another laugh. "You all know how sensitive men can be about these things." My mother stood up and started clapping. "That was hilarious, Ottilie. You always were the funny one in the family." A few of her friends joined in the applause, but most of the room remained uncomfortably quiet. Paul Wynn stood up, his face dark with anger. "That was completely inappropriate," he said loudly enough for nearby tables to hear. "Absolutely disgraceful." He stormed out, followed by several other family members. Rachel approached me, her eyes blazing. "How could you do that to him? In front of everyone?" "That was cruel, Ottilie." "Oh, please," I waved her off. "It's just a harmless joke. Michael needs to learn to laugh at himself. Marriage is about being able to tease each other." "That wasn't teasing," Rachel shot back. "That was public humiliation. You just embarrassed your husband in front of his entire family, his co-workers, everyone he knows." Tanya rushed over, still giggling. "Don't listen to her, Ottilie. That was hilarious. Everyone's just being too sensitive. Michael will get over it." But as I looked around the reception hall, I could see people whispering to each other, shooting glances in my direction. Some were shaking their heads disapprovingly. The festive atmosphere had completely evaporated. "Where did Michael go?" I asked one of his groomsmen. "He left," the man replied coldly, took off his jacket and walked right out to the parking lot, said he needed air. I spent the next hour looking for my new husband, but he was nowhere to be found. His car was gone from the parking lot. When I tried calling his phone, it went straight to voicemail. Later that night, I posted the video Tanya had taken of my toast on social media. "Best wedding toast ever," I captioned it. "When you can laugh about everything in marriage, you know it's true love." The responses were mixed. Some of my friends thought it was hilarious, but others were less enthusiastic. Michael's family and friends remained notably silent. Michael finally came home at 3 a.m. I was waiting in our bedroom, still in my wedding dress. "Where were you?" I demanded. "You left your own wedding reception." He looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before, cold, distant, almost like he was looking at a stranger. I needed to think. "About what? It was just a joke, Michael. Everyone knows I was kidding around." "Everyone knows," he repeated slowly. "Yes, they do now. Everyone knows intimate details about our private life because you decided to share them for a laugh." "Oh, come on," I said, starting to feel frustrated. "You're being way too sensitive about this. It's not like I said anything that wasn't true." Michael stared at me for a long moment. "That's what you think this is about? Whether it was true or not?" "I don't understand why you're making such a big deal out of this. Couples tease each other all the time." "Not like that," he said quietly. "Not in front of everyone we know. Not about something so personal." He grabbed a pillow from the bed and headed toward the door. "Where are you going?" "Guest room," he said without turning around. "I need space to think." As I watched him leave, I felt a flicker of unease, but I pushed it down. He was just being overly dramatic. By tomorrow, this would all blow over, and we'd laugh about it together. I had no idea that my harmless joke had just set in motion a chain of events that would destroy everything I thought I knew about my marriage. The next few weeks were tense in our house. Michael continued sleeping in the guest room, claiming he was having trouble sleeping and didn't want to disturb me. But I could feel the distance growing between us like a cold wall. "Good morning," I said cheerfully as he poured coffee in the kitchen. Our 7-year-old daughter, Ella, sat at the breakfast table, quietly eating her cereal. Michael nodded, but didn't meet my eyes. "Morning." "I thought maybe we could go out to dinner tonight," I suggested. "Just the two of us. We could get Mrs. Henderson to watch Ella." "I have to work late," he replied, gathering his papers. "Big audit coming up." This had become his standard response to everything. Work late, weekend projects, anything to avoid spending time alone with me. It was starting to make me feel unwanted and frustrated. At work, I found myself complaining to Daniel Vaughan, a charming marketing coordinator who worked 2 cubicles over from me. Daniel was everything Michael wasn't: spontaneous, funny, and most importantly, he actually listened to me. "He's still giving you the cold shoulder?" Daniel asked as we stood by the coffee machine. "It's been 3 weeks," I sighed. 3 weeks of him acting like I committed some terrible crime. All I did was make a little joke at our wedding. "Some guys just can't handle their ego being bruised," Daniel said sympathetically. "A confident man would have laughed it off." "Exactly." I felt validated hearing someone else say it. "I mean, if you can't joke around with your spouse, what's the point of being married?" Daniel's eyes sparkled with mischief. "Well, if he's not appreciating what he has at home, maybe he doesn't deserve it." The comment sent a little thrill through me. Daniel was attractive, with dark hair and green eyes that seemed to see right through me. More importantly, he made me feel interesting and desirable, something Michael hadn't done in weeks. "You're terrible," I laughed, but I didn't move away when he stepped closer. "Just honest," he said quietly. "You deserve someone who appreciates your sense of humor." That evening, I tried again with Michael. "I made your favorite dinner," I announced as he walked through the door. "Thanks," he said, but his tone was flat. During dinner, Ella chatted about her day at school, but Michael and I barely spoke. "Daddy, why don't you and Mommy talk anymore?" Ella asked suddenly. Michael and I exchanged glances. "We talk, sweetheart," I said quickly. "Daddy's just been busy with work." "Are you mad at Mommy?" Ella pressed, looking at Michael with worried eyes. No, baby, Michael said softly, his expression gentling as he looked at our daughter. Daddy's not mad. But after Ella went to bed, the coldness returned. We need to talk about this, I said, cornering him in the living room. This silent treatment has gone on long enough. I'm not giving you the silent treatment, Michael replied, not looking up from his laptop. I'm just trying to process everything. Process what? It was a joke, Michael. One joke at our wedding. You're acting like I cheated on you or something. He finally looked at me then, and I was startled by the pain in his eyes. Do you have any idea how humiliating that was? Having my wife tell 200 people intimate details about our marriage. Having your mother laugh about it. Having my co-workers hear you mock me. I wasn't mocking you, I protested. I was just being funny. Everyone knows I love you. Everyone knows you think I'm inadequate, he corrected. Everyone knows you find our private life amusing enough to share for entertainment. I felt my patience snapping. You know what? Maybe if you weren't being so cold and distant, I wouldn't have to look elsewhere for someone to actually talk to. The words slipped out before I could stop them. Michael's eyes sharpened. What do you mean, look elsewhere? Nothing, I said quickly. I just meant, you're making me feel lonely, Michael. You're pushing me away. So this is my fault now? He asked quietly. I'm not saying it's your fault. I'm saying we both need to work on this. But you sleeping in the guest room and barely speaking to me isn't helping anything. Michael closed his laptop and stood up. Maybe you're right. Maybe we do both need to work on things. For a moment I felt hopeful, but then he headed toward the stairs. Where are you going? To bed, he said, in the guest room. The next day at work, I was feeling particularly frustrated when Daniel stopped by my desk. Lunch? He asked with that charming smile. I'd love to, I said, grabbing my purse. We went to a quiet cafe a few blocks away from the office. Daniel was attentive and funny, asking about my interests and actually listening to my answers. When he complimented my dress, I felt a flutter of attraction I hadn't experienced in months. Your husband's an idiot, Daniel said as I told him about the previous night's conversation. If I had a wife like you, I'd never let her feel unappreciated. You're sweet, I said, feeling my cheeks warm. I'm serious, he said, reaching across the table to touch my hand. You're beautiful, intelligent, funny. Any man would be lucky to have you. His hand was warm on mine, and I didn't pull away. For the first time in weeks, I felt desired and valued. That night, Michael was on his laptop again when I got home. I tried to tell him about my day, but he gave only distracted responses. Did you hear anything I just said? I asked, irritated. Sorry, he said, still typing. What was it? Never mind, I snapped. Clearly your computer is more interesting than your wife. As I stormed upstairs, my phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. Hope your evening is better than your afternoon. You deserve to be happy. I smiled as I read it, feeling a warm glow that had nothing to do with my marriage. Maybe Daniel was right. Maybe I did deserve better than Michael's cold shoulder and emotional distance. I texted back, Thank you. That means a lot. His response came quickly. Sweet dreams, beautiful. I fell asleep that night with my phone in my hand, feeling more appreciated than I had in weeks. In the guest room down the hall, Michael was awake too, but I had no idea he was quietly going through our phone bill, highlighting every call and text to Daniel's number. The cracks in our marriage were widening, and I was too caught up in the attention from another man to notice the foundation crumbling beneath my feet. Over the next month, my relationship with Daniel deepened while my marriage continued to deteriorate. Michael and I were like polite strangers sharing a house, going through the motions for Ella's sake, but barely connecting on any meaningful level. You're glowing lately, Tanya observed as we had lunch in the office break room. What's your secret? I glanced around to make sure no one was listening. It's nothing serious, I said quietly. Just someone who appreciates me. Tanya's eyes widened. Ottilie, are you having an affair? It's not an affair, I protested. We're just friends. He listens to me, makes me feel valued. Michael certainly isn't doing that. Who is it? She whispered. I nodded toward Daniel's desk. He was on the phone but caught my eye and winked. Daniel Vaughan. Tanya looked impressed. He's gorgeous and single. We just talk, I insisted. Well, mostly just talk. The truth was, Daniel and I had been meeting for lunch several times a week. Our conversations had grown increasingly intimate, and there had been moments, lingering touches, meaningful looks, a few stolen kisses in his car, that definitely crossed the line from friendship. Does Michael suspect anything? Tanya asked. Michael barely notices I exist anymore, I said bitterly. He's still punishing me for that stupid wedding toast. It's like he's determined to make me pay for one little joke for the rest of our marriage. Maybe it's time to stop feeling guilty about finding happiness elsewhere, Tanya suggested, if he's not meeting your emotional needs. That afternoon, Daniel stopped by my desk. Coffee? He asked casually. We walked to the cafe that had become our regular meeting spot. It was far enough from the office that we were unlikely to run into co-workers, but close enough that I could claim I was just running errands. You look stressed, Daniel observed as we settled into our usual corner booth. Things at home are getting worse, I admitted. Michael's completely shut down. We're like roommates who happen to share a child. Daniel reached across the table and took my hand. You know you deserve better than that. I keep telling myself it will get better, I said, but it's been over a month, and he's still treating me like I'm the enemy. Maybe it's time to stop waiting for him to change, Daniel said softly. Maybe it's time to think about what you want. His thumb traced circles on my palm, and I felt that familiar flutter of excitement. With Daniel, I felt alive again, desirable, important. I want to feel valued, I whispered. I want someone who doesn't punish me for being human. You have that, he said, leaning closer. You have me. When he kissed me in the parking lot behind the cafe, I didn't pull away. It felt like coming up for air after drowning. But our secret wasn't as well kept as we thought. The next week, Rachel called me at work. We need to talk, she said without preamble. About what? About what my friend Jennifer saw at Morrison's Cafe last Tuesday. My blood ran cold. Jennifer worked at the bank across from our usual meeting spot. I don't know what you're talking about, I said, but my voice sounded weak even to me. She saw you with some guy. Said you two looked pretty cozy. Said she was surprised because she thought you were happily married. It was just a co-worker, I said quickly. We were discussing a project. A project that required holding hands and kissing in the parking lot. I felt trapped. Rachel, it's not what you think. Then what is it, Ottilie? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you humiliated my brother at your wedding, and now you're cheating on him. It's not cheating, I snapped. It's friendship. And maybe if your brother hadn't been treating me like a pariah for the past 6 weeks, I wouldn't need to look elsewhere for emotional support. So this is Michael's fault? Rachel's voice was incredulous. You embarrass him publicly, then cheat on him, and somehow he's the bad guy. I'm not cheating, I insisted, and I'm tired of everyone acting like I committed murder with one little joke. It was funny. It was cruel, Rachel shot back, and now you're making it worse. She hung up on me. I sat staring at my phone, feeling a mix of anger and panic. How dare she judge me? She had no idea what my marriage was like, how lonely and unappreciated I felt. That evening, Michael was unusually quiet during dinner. Even Ella noticed. Daddy, you're not eating, she said. Just thinking about work, sweetheart, he replied, but his eyes kept flicking to me. After Ella went to bed, I decided to address the situation head-on. Did Rachel call you today? I asked. Michael looked up from his laptop. Why would Rachel call me? No reason, I said, trying to sound casual. I just thought maybe she mentioned running into me downtown. She didn't mention that, Michael said slowly. Should she have? Of course not. I just had lunch with a coworker and thought maybe someone saw us. Michael's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. Which coworker? Just someone from marketing, I said vaguely. We were discussing the Henderson account. I see. Michael closed his laptop. Well, I'm sure it was a productive meeting. There was something in his tone that made me nervous, but I couldn't put my finger on what. Michael, we really need to work on our communication, I said. This distance between us isn't healthy. You're right, he agreed. Communication is important in a marriage. For a moment I felt hopeful, but then he stood up and headed for the stairs. Where are you going? To make some phone calls, he said. Work stuff. But as I watched him climb the stairs, I noticed he was carrying a manila folder I'd never seen before, and for the first time in weeks, there was something in his posture that looked less like defeat and more like determination. I tried to push down the growing unease, telling myself I was being paranoid. Michael was a quiet, predictable accountant. He wasn't the type to play games or set traps. But as I lay in bed that night, listening to his muffled voice through the guest room door, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had fundamentally changed. And when my phone buzzed with a sweet goodnight text from Daniel, instead of feeling the usual warm glow, I felt a flicker of something that might have been fear. 2 weeks later, Michael suggested we host a dinner party for both our families. I was thrilled. It seemed like the first positive step he'd taken toward repairing our relationship. That's a wonderful idea, I said enthusiastically. It'll be nice to have everyone together again. I thought so too, Michael replied, but there was something in his tone I couldn't quite read. We planned the dinner for the following Saturday. I spent all week preparing, wanting everything to be perfect. Maybe this was Michael's way of showing he was ready to move past the wedding incident and work on our marriage. Daniel had been understanding about my need to focus on family that week. Take all the time you need, he'd said when I explained I couldn't meet for lunch. I'm not going anywhere. Saturday evening arrived, and our dining room looked beautiful with candles and fresh flowers. Paul and his wife arrived first, followed by Rachel and her boyfriend. My mother came with her sister, and Tanya brought a bottle of wine. Everything looks lovely, dear, my mother said, giving me a hug. It's so nice to see you and Michael making an effort. Michael was the perfect host, charming and attentive to our guests. For the first time in months, he seemed relaxed and happy. I began to feel hopeful that we were finally turning a corner. During dinner, the conversation flowed easily. Michael told funny stories about work, and even Paul seemed to be warming up to me again after the wedding incident. This is delicious, Ottilie, Rachel said, trying a bite of the salmon. You've really outdone yourself. Thank you, I beamed. I wanted tonight to be special. As we moved on to dessert, I was feeling so good about how everything was going that I decided to lighten the mood with some humor. You know, I said with a laugh, I should probably apologize to everyone for Michael's performance tonight. The table went quiet. Michael's fork paused halfway to his mouth. What do you mean? Tanya asked nervously. Well, he's been so charming and talkative, I continued, oblivious to the tension building around me. Usually he's much more, shall we say, underwhelming in social situations, just like in other areas of life, if you know what I mean. I winked at the group, expecting laughter. Instead, I was met with horrified silence. Ottilie, my mother said quietly, maybe we should change the subject. But I was on a roll, feeling witty and entertaining. Oh, come on. Everyone knows Michael's not exactly Mr. Excitement, whether we're talking about parties or other activities. Ella, who had been quietly colouring at the kids' table we'd set up, looked up with confused eyes. Mummy, why are you being mean to Daddy? The innocent question hit the table like a bomb. Rachel's face went white, then red with anger. Paul set down his napkin with deliberate precision. That's enough, Rachel said firmly. Ella, sweetie, why don't you go watch TV in the living room? But I want to stay with everyone, Ella protested. Go, Michael said quietly, his voice strained. Please, honey. As Ella reluctantly left the room, The silence stretched uncomfortably. I suddenly realized that my joke hadn't landed the way I'd intended. "I was just kidding around," I said with a nervous laugh. "Everyone knows I love Michael." "Do we?" Paul asked coldly. "Because from where I'm sitting, it seems like you enjoy humiliating your husband in front of his family." "That's not what I was doing," I protested. "I was just trying to be funny." "At his expense," Rachel added, her voice shaking with anger. "Again." Michael stood up slowly, his face completely expressionless. "Excuse me," he said politely. "I need some air." He walked out of the dining room, leaving me facing a table full of angry faces. "How could you do that?" Rachel demanded. "In front of Ella? In front of all of us? Haven't you humiliated him enough?" "I think there's been a misunderstanding," I said, looking around for support. "It was just a little joke." "It wasn't funny," Paul said firmly. "It was cruel, and the fact that you can't see that is deeply troubling." My mother tried to come to my defense. "Now, Paul, Ottilie didn't mean any harm. She's always been the type to use humor to lighten the mood." "There's a difference between humor and humiliation," Paul replied, "and your daughter seems incapable of understanding that difference." Tanya, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly stood up. "I think I should go," she said awkwardly. "Thank you for dinner." "Tanya, wait," I called, but she was already gathering her purse. One by one, the guests began leaving. Rachel didn't even say goodbye, just shook her head at me with disgust and walked out. Paul followed, stopping only to tell me, "You need to take a long, hard look at yourself, Ottilie. This behavior is unacceptable." Soon, only my mother and I were left in the dining room, surrounded by half-eaten desserts and abandoned wine glasses. "Well, that was dramatic," I said, trying to salvage some dignity. "Everyone's being so sensitive." "Ottilie," my mother said gently, "maybe you should consider that they might have a point." "You too?" I stared at her in disbelief. "You're taking their side?" "I'm not taking sides. I'm just saying, maybe Michael's feelings matter too." I started clearing the table aggressively, clanking dishes together. "His feelings? What about my feelings? What about the fact that he's been treating me like a stranger for 2 months? What about the fact that I'm lonely and unappreciated in my own marriage?" "Have you told him that?" my mother asked. "I shouldn't have to tell him. He should notice. He should care." My mother sighed. "Marriage is work, honey. It requires communication from both sides." After she left, I found Michael in his study, packing papers into a briefcase. "Where are you going?" I demanded. "My father's house," he said without looking up. "You're leaving, in the middle of our dinner party disaster." "The dinner party is over, Ottilie, and frankly, so is my patience." "What's that supposed to mean?" Michael finally looked at me, and I was shocked by the coldness in his eyes. "It means I'm done being your verbal punching bag. I'm done being humiliated for your entertainment. I'm done pretending this marriage is working." "One bad joke and you're ready to give up on 8 years of marriage?" I asked incredulously. "One bad joke." Michael's voice rose for the first time in months. "Ottilie, you've made jokes about my inadequacy at our wedding, at dinner parties, in front of our daughter. You've posted videos online mocking me. You've made it clear to everyone we know that you find me disappointing." "That's not true, isn't it?" He closed the briefcase with a sharp snap. "Tell me, Ottilie, when's the last time you said something positive about me to anyone? When's the last time you defended me instead of using me as material for your comedy routine?" I opened my mouth to respond, but no words came. I couldn't remember. "That's what I thought," Michael said sadly. "And while you've been busy making me the butt of your jokes, you've also been busy making new friends." My heart stopped. "What do you mean?" "I mean Daniel Vaughan from your office. I mean lunch dates and parking lot kisses and late-night text messages." The blood drained from my face. "Michael, I can explain." "No need," he said, hefting the briefcase. "It's all been very educational." "Where are you going with that?" I asked, pointing at the briefcase. "To make sure I protect what matters most," he replied. Ella deserves better than this chaos. He walked past me toward the door, then paused. By the way, you might want to be more careful about your lunch locations. Downtown has a lot of security cameras. As I watched him drive away, I felt the first real stab of fear. Michael wasn't acting like the quiet, passive man I'd married. He was acting like someone with a plan. And for the first time since this whole mess started, I wondered if I had seriously underestimated my husband. The next week was a nightmare. Michael didn't come home, staying at his father's house and only returning to pick up Ella for school or activities. When I tried to call him, he was polite but distant, treating me like a business associate rather than his wife. Daniel tried to be supportive, but even he seemed rattled by the sudden escalation. Maybe we should cool things off for a while, he suggested when I met him for coffee. Until you get your situation sorted out. What situation? I asked, feeling panicked. Michael's just being dramatic. He'll calm down. Ottilie, he knows about us, Daniel said quietly. That changes things. How much could he really know? We've been careful. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. Have we? I mean, we've been meeting regularly for months. We've been texting. There are probably records. For the first time, I began to understand the gravity of the situation. You're not going to abandon me, are you? I asked. I mean, we have something real, don't we? Of course, Daniel said, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. I just think we need to be smart about this. At home, Ella was becoming increasingly withdrawn and anxious. When is Daddy coming home? She asked for the 100th time. Soon, sweetheart, I assured her. Daddy just needs some space to think. Is it because you were mean to him at dinner? The question cut deep. I wasn't mean, honey. Mommy and Daddy just need to work some things out. My friend Katie's parents got divorced, Ella said quietly. Is that going to happen to us? No, baby, I said firmly. That's not going to happen. But even as I said it, I wasn't sure I believed it. My mother came over later that week, looking worried. Have you talked to Michael? She asked. He won't really talk to me, I admitted. He just discusses Ella's schedule and practical things. Ottilie, I'm concerned about you, about this whole situation. Everyone's overreacting, I insisted. So I made some jokes. So I had a friendship with a co-worker. Michael's acting like I committed murder. A friendship? My mother asked gently. Is that really all it was? I looked away. It doesn't matter what it was. Michael drove me to it with his coldness and rejection. Honey, you need to take responsibility for your actions. You can't blame Michael for choices you made. Whose side are you on? I demanded. I'm on the side of my daughter fixing her marriage before it's too late, she replied. But it might have already been too late. That Friday, a man in a suit knocked on my door. Ottilie Wynn? He asked. Yes? You've been served. He handed me a thick manila envelope and walked away. With shaking hands, I opened the envelope. Inside were legal documents, petition for legal separation, custody arrangements, and something that made my blood run cold. A thick folder labeled Evidence of Adultery and Character. The folder contained everything. Photos of Daniel and me at the cafe, taken from across the street. Printouts of our text messages, somehow obtained through phone records. Witness statements from co-workers who had noticed our relationship. Even security camera footage from the parking lot where we'd kissed. But worse than the evidence of my relationship with Daniel were the other documents. Screenshots of the wedding toast video I'd posted online, with comments from viewers expressing shock and sympathy for Michael. Witness statements from dinner party guests describing my behavior. Even a statement from Ella's school counselor expressing concern about her recent emotional changes. The legal papers were requesting primary custody of Ella, citing an unstable home environment created by respondents' public humiliation of petitioner an extramarital affair. I sank onto the couch, the papers scattered around me. This wasn't the Michael I knew. The Michael I'd married would never have been this thorough, this strategic. He'd always been quiet, passive, someone who avoided conflict. But as I read through the meticulously documented evidence, I realized I'd been completely wrong about my husband. He hadn't been passively accepting my behavior. He'd been quietly building a case against me. My phone rang. It was Tanya. "Ottilie, I just got a call from some lawyer," she said nervously. "They want to interview me about your marriage and your relationship with Daniel." "What did you tell them?" "Nothing yet, but Ottilie, they seem to know everything. They asked specific questions about conversations we've had, places we've been. How do they know so much?" I looked at the evidence folder again. "They've been investigating me." "This is serious," Tanya said. "Maybe you should get a lawyer." After she hung up, I tried calling Michael, but it went straight to voicemail. I tried his father's house. "Paul, I need to speak to Michael," I said when he answered. "He's not available," Paul replied coldly. "Please, this is important. I got some legal papers today." "I'm sure you did, and I'm sure they're exactly what you deserve." "How can you say that? I'm your daughter-in-law." "You are my daughter-in-law," Paul corrected. "Now you're just the woman who humiliated my son and broke up his family." The line went dead. I spent the weekend trying to reach Michael, calling his office, his friends, anyone who might know where he was. But it was like he'd disappeared. Monday morning at work, I was a wreck. Daniel avoided me, barely making eye contact when we passed in the hallway. Even my other co-workers seemed to be giving me strange looks. "Is everything okay?" I asked my supervisor, Janet, when she stopped by my desk. "Actually, Ottilie, I need to speak with you," she said. "In my office." My heart sank as I followed her. Janet closed the door and sat behind her desk with a serious expression. "I've received some inquiries about your conduct," she said carefully. "Questions about your relationship with Daniel Vaughan and whether it's been affecting your work performance." "My work performance has been fine," I protested. "Your work performance has been adequate," Janet corrected. "But your personal conduct has become a distraction. Several employees have expressed discomfort with the situation." "What situation? I haven't done anything wrong." "Ottilie, you've been having an affair with a co-worker. That creates a hostile work environment and potential liability issues for the company." I felt my world crashing down around me. "Are you firing me?" "I'm putting you on administrative leave while we conduct a full investigation," Janet said. "You'll need to clear out your desk and surrender your access card." As I packed my personal items into a cardboard box, I could feel everyone watching me. Daniel was nowhere to be seen. I later learned he'd called in sick that day. Driving home with my belongings in the back seat, I realized that Michael hadn't just been building a legal case against me. He'd been systematically destroying every aspect of my life that had made me feel secure and valued. And the most terrifying part was that I was beginning to understand this was probably just the beginning. 3 months later, I sat in a sterile conference room across from Michael and his lawyer, feeling like a stranger in my own life. The man I'd been married to for 8 years looked completely different, confident, composed, and utterly unmoved by my tears. "Mrs. Wynn," his attorney began, "my client is prepared to offer you a final settlement." I looked at the papers through blurry eyes. Michael would get primary custody of Ella, with me having supervised visitation every other weekend. He would keep the house, the car, and most of our assets. I would be responsible for my own legal fees and half of the marital debt. "This is insane," I said, my voice breaking. "Michael, how can you do this to me? To Ella, she needs her mother." Michael spoke for the first time since we'd entered the room. "Ella needs stability. She needs a parent who won't use her as ammunition in adult conflicts." "I never used her as ammunition." "You made jokes about our marriage in front of her," Michael replied calmly. "You created an environment where she was worried about her parents' relationship. You had an affair and lied about it. The court agreed that your behavior was detrimental to her emotional well-being." The custody hearing had been a nightmare. Michael's lawyer had presented a devastating case, complete with testimony from Ella's school counselor about her declining grades, and increased anxiety. They'd shown the wedding toast video to the judge, along with witness statements about the dinner party incident. Worst of all, they'd called Ella herself to speak with the judge privately. When she came out of the judge's chambers, she wouldn't look at me. "What did she say?" I'd asked my lawyer desperately. "She said she wants to live with her father," he'd replied quietly. "She said she's tired of you and Daddy fighting, and she feels safer at Grandpa Paul's house." Now, facing the final dissolution of my marriage, I made one last desperate attempt. "Michael, please," I begged. "I know I made mistakes, but we can work this out. We can go to counseling. I'll do whatever it takes." "It's too late for that," Michael said. "You made your choices, Ottilie. Now you have to live with the consequences." "What about Daniel?" I asked suddenly. "What about what you did to him?" Michael's expression didn't change. "What about him?" "You got him fired. You ruined his career." "Daniel got himself fired by having an affair with a married co-worker," Michael corrected. "The company made their own decision based on their own policies." It was true. After the investigation, both Daniel and I had been terminated. But while I'd been fighting for my marriage and my daughter, Daniel had simply disappeared. He'd moved to another city without even saying goodbye, leaving me to face the wreckage alone. "You destroyed everything," I whispered. "No," Michael said firmly. "You destroyed everything. I just documented it." His lawyer slid the papers across the table. "These are the final divorce decree and custody arrangements. Sign here, here, and here." My own lawyer, a court-appointed attorney who'd barely had time to review my case, nodded encouragingly. "It's the best deal you're going to get, Ottilie. I'd recommend signing." With a shaking hand, I signed away my marriage, my home, and my daily relationship with my daughter. As we prepared to leave, Michael stood and straightened his tie. For a moment, he looked like the quiet, gentle man I'd married. But when he spoke, his voice was steel. "I want you to understand something," he said. "Every joke you made at my expense, every time you humiliated me in public, every lie you told about working late, I remember all of it. I documented all of it. And when Ella's old enough to ask why her parents got divorced, she'll have access to all of it." "You can't turn my own daughter against me," I protested. "I won't have to," Michael replied. "The truth will speak for itself." He paused at the door. "You know what the ironic thing is, Ottilie? If you'd just apologized after the wedding toast, really apologized, not just dismissed my feelings, we might have worked through this. If you'd been honest about feeling neglected instead of having an affair, we might have fixed our problems. But you chose humiliation and deception instead of honesty and respect." "I did love you," I said desperately. "Maybe you did," Michael acknowledged, "but you didn't respect me. And without respect, love isn't enough." 6 months later, I was living in a small apartment across town, working as a receptionist at a dental office, and seeing Ella every other weekend under the watchful eye of a court-appointed supervisor. The supervised visits were the worst part. Ella was polite, but distant, like she was visiting a relative she barely knew. She talked about school, her friends, and her activities with Michael and Grandpa Paul, but she never talked about missing me or wanting to come home. "How are things with your mum?" I'd overheard the supervisor ask her once. "Fine," Ella had replied matter-of-factly. "But I like living with Daddy better. It's quieter." Quieter. That's what my daughter preferred about life without me. The absence of conflict, drama, and emotional chaos that I'd brought to our home. My mother still called occasionally, but our relationship had never recovered from the divorce. She'd been forced to testify about my behavior, and the experience had opened her eyes to patterns she'd previously ignored or excused. "I enabled you," she told me sadly. "I taught you that being funny was more important than being kind. I'm sorry for that." Tanya had moved away shortly after the divorce, claiming she needed a fresh start. But I suspected she was just tired of being associated with the scandal. Most of my other friends had gradually drifted away, uncomfortable with the messy reality of my situation. It was easier to maintain friendships when I was the entertaining wife making jokes about her husband. It was harder when I became the divorced woman who'd lost custody of her child. On a cold Tuesday evening, almost a year after the divorce was finalized, I drove past my old house. Michael's car was in the driveway, and I could see warm light glowing from the kitchen windows. Through the window, I glimpsed Ella at the kitchen table, probably doing homework while Michael cooked dinner. They looked peaceful, happy, complete without me. As I sat in my car watching the life I'd destroyed, I finally understood what Michael had been trying to tell me all along. Marriage wasn't a comedy routine where one person was the star and the other was the punchline. It was a partnership built on mutual respect, trust, and consideration. I'd treated my husband like a prop in my own entertainment, never considering that he was a whole person with feelings, dignity, and limits. I'd justified my affair by blaming him for my loneliness, never taking responsibility for my own choices. And now, watching my daughter thrive in the stable home Michael had created for her, I realized that his revenge hadn't been about punishment at all. It had been about protection, protecting himself from further humiliation, and protecting our daughter from the toxic environment I'd created. I started the car and drove back to my empty apartment, finally understanding that some mistakes can't be undone with apologies or excuses. Some consequences are permanent, and some trust, once broken, can never be repaired. The toast that I'd thought was so harmless had indeed ended my marriage. But it hadn't been the joke itself that destroyed everything. It had been my complete inability to understand why it wasn't funny. Michael had been right about one thing. When Ella was old enough to understand what had happened, the truth would speak for itself. And the truth was that I'd had a choice between being entertaining and being a good wife and mother, and I'd chosen wrong. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next story. Write in the comments from which city you are watching.